In 1966, the Chicago Bears drafted the son of a Pennsylvania coal miner in the 4th round. Doug Buffone would go on to play 15 seasons for the Bears and later be named one of the 100 greatest Bears of all time. His allegiance to the Bears never waned, even when he took to the microphone and witnessed some horrendous Bears teams.
The fact is, there's not the fear put into them, because this game is a lot about fear. You either do the job, or you go home and go sell hamburgers at McDonald's.
Doug told it like it is, and that's part of the reason his nephew John has dedicated this show to Doug. And now John Buffone is spreading Buffone-branded beratements just like his uncle.
Win the football game. You're the head coach. I don't care what you have your fingers in. I don't care what you're meddling in. You're the head freaking coach. We get it. You're the most important guy on the staff. You don't have to keep trying to legitimize that.
And he's got pep talks too.
I love this team. And I know everyone watching and listening loves this team. So while we may be pessimistic and cynical, every one of us still has hope that the stars will align at some point. And if that ever does happen, you'll be glad you stuck around.
John is telling it like it is here on Buffone 55. And joining John are Alyssa Barbieri, managing editor of USA Today's NFL Wires, including Bears Wire, and also Danny Shimon, lead game and draft analyst for the Barroom Network. Buckle up and bear down. This is Buffone 55, The John Buffone Show.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Buffone 55, a fast-paced approach at breaking down those Chicago Bears. With me, as always, is my co-host and producer, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, we were due for another shot of reality here in the bar room, and boy, did we get it with that ugly friggin' loss to the Chargers on Sunday night. Throw in some trade deadline drama, and another coach is gone, and well, who has time to talk about the Saints? How you doing?
I'm doing good. My goodness, I forgot about that game on Sunday for a split second just because of how busy yesterday and today have been. So it's been crazy. And to make matters worse, that game that was broadcast to the entire world was a primetime game. And I was up until 2:30 again, writing about the same old. It's one step forward and like 5 or 20 or 100 steps back with this team.
Yeah, the steps forward are nowhere close to the steps backward. And then you throw in everything else that's going on around this organization. And honestly, it's just like, I forgot they have a game on Sunday. They got to play this. They got to play the Saints. Who's breaking down the X's and O's and the matchups against the Saints right now? Is anyone interested in that? Is anybody talking about that? Do people care? Because there's so much other stuff going on with the Chicago Bears that it's like you kind of forget that they're a football team sometimes. But eventually we're going to have to break down that game. But before we get back into the swing of things, Alyssa, can you give everyone a rundown of how Buffone 55 works?
I sure can. We will begin with the classic B55 segment. That's when I ask John 5 questions about the Bears, and his responses must be completed within 55 seconds. The 55 is John's way of paying tribute to the great Doug Buffone, his uncle, his mentor, and a man who played 15 seasons with the Bears and wore number 55. Then at halftime, we're going to break down the Bears' upcoming opponent because they do play a game this week. And this week, we're going to be taking a deep dive on the New Orleans Saints, who are trending up after recently snapping a 2-game losing streak. We're then going to finish things up with a free-for-all that we call Buffone's Basement, where Danny Shimon joins John and me, and the three of us are going to have yet another therapy session after a brutal showing in primetime. So, John, coming off of a bad loss, do you have the energy for this?
As much as I possibly can. Let's give it a go.
Okay, then. So it's time for our B55 segment. That's when I'm going to ask John 5 questions, and he's going to somehow manage to keep his responses within 55 seconds. Most of the time he does that. So let's go ahead and get it started. So, John, it felt like the Bears may have had some momentum heading into Sunday night's game, but that was quickly shut down and very early. The Bears never really got anything going on either side of the ball and ultimately fell to the Chargers 30-13. I know you love primetime games just as much as I do. How much did this game aggravate you? Ready? 55 seconds and go.
Well, there was a glimmer of hope right after they went down the field to Darnell Mooney on the first play, and then you see the replay that he wasn't exactly touchdown, and that was kind of a weird omen for the rest of the night, and I think that was the last thing that held my attention. I remember sometime in the third quarter, I was thinking to myself, wow, if I weren't a Bears fan and I didn't have to talk about this game on Wednesday, I'd probably be in bed right now watching reruns of The Simpsons and falling asleep before the end of the game. The defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. They didn't establish their run game, and Tyson Bagent obviously struggled. Throw in the fact that it was a primetime game and the whole country got to see the Bears look like a traveling circus, and I'd say it was pretty frustrating from start to finish. At no point did it really feel like a competitive football game. So I had to stay up late, watch my favorite team get embarrassed, and then wake up with that losing taste still in my mouth on Monday morning. So aggravating. Yeah, I think that would most likely be an understatement of how I felt after that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It was brutal because like the Bears so often do, they give you that little glimmer of hope. And that was that first pass to Darnell Mooney. And then they just yank it away from you. And it was just all downhill after that. And I'm just like, oh my God, here we go. Again, it's the same old thing. It's kind of like, when the Bears play inferior opponents that are on the same level as them, they look good, right? And then when they play a quality opponent, all of a sudden it's just like, oh, okay, there we go. That's who the Bears are. We knew who the Bears are. The Bears are who we thought they were. Yeah. And to make matters worse, like you said, it was a primetime game. I despise primetime games just as much as you. I was up till 2:30 in the morning writing the same stories it feels like I've been writing for the last 2 years, 4 years, whatever. And I don't know, it's just frustrating because football's supposed to be fun. And I feel like I've said this before, and I know I have. And that was just not fun. It wasn't even close. It's like at least, for some games, like the Broncos game, but again, an inferior opponent. At least when the Bears can kind of keep it close, at least for the first half, it's like, okay, we're in this. And then all of a sudden, reality comes crashing down. But this wasn't even close.
It's not, you're right. It's not fun because we lost so much hope in the first 3 weeks of the season, basically. Like it was like, it's not fun when you think your team is destined to be a really bad football team. Like if you're destined to be in the top 5 picking again at the draft and you already are, surmising that in, week 4, it's like, oh God, we got to do this for like, how many more weeks? How many more games? Let's get to the draft. Let's fast forward. And I'm tired of feeling like that. We wait 8 months for week 1, and then by week 2, we're like, oh my God, there's still the same team. And that's carrying itself into more and more of the season. And we're barely halfway through, and that nothing has changed as far as like our demeanor towards this team, really.
It's really sad too, because I don't like feeling like this as a fan. I'm like, oh my God, we're not even halfway through yet. I'm like, it sucks that I'm like, oh man, I'm looking forward to the end of the season because I don't want to be like that. I want to enjoy the season because I know we're going to be back as soon as football's over. We're going to be like waiting, the next 6-8 months, whatever, for more football. And it's just, it's frustrating because when you see other fan bases and other, teams out there and they get to be excited all season. It's a journey. Even if it ends in heartbreak, at least, they're along for the ride. I feel like after week 1, it was over, which is crazy, but that's where we are.
There was some weird, internet polls. Like, would you rather holistically be a Bears fan or a Bills fan? And I was like, at least their seasons are interesting. They've gone to 4 straight Super Bowls and they lost, but at least their regular seasons are fun rides. Yeah, I mean, the Bears won a Super Bowl 37 years ago. I wasn't alive. I didn't get to see that. I didn't get to have fun with that. So why? That's not even a debate. As far, I'm always going to be a Bears fan, but what history would you rather have? Jeez. Give me 4 straight Super Bowls. At least I would have had fun from August until January rather than be like, okay, let's see what their draft order is going to be or who's on the mock draft. And it's, September. So it's rough going.
Is there another option? Because I don't know if I can handle 4 straight Super Bowls. I don't know. After the second, I'd be done.
Oh yeah, but at least like it's fun. Now maybe after the second one, the regular season loses some of its luster, where it's just like, okay, I don't even care. It only matters what we do in the postseason from here on out. So maybe like in the back end of that, you lose some interest because it's like, okay, I don't even care about the regular season anymore. Get us to the playoffs. But I don't remember ever feeling that way where I'm just like, get us to the playoffs and see what we can do. I'm just like,
playoffs? What are playoffs?
I just knocked my mic over talking about that. Playoffs. It's been tough sledding for Bears fans.
Yeah, just absolutely brutal. Getting back to the game, so because there was a game, one of the biggest storylines heading into that Chargers game was rookie quarterback Tyson Bagent. After beating the Raiders the previous week, Bagent went 25 of 37 for 232 yards with 2 interceptions and 1 rushing touchdown. So after 2 starts, John, what are your thoughts on Bagent? 55 seconds are on the clock.
Well, like I said, he struggled at times, and I feel like we kind of set this up to happen because the way the media works and fans work sometimes, and I'm as guilty as anyone, so I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, is that if something isn't blatantly terrible, it's the best thing in the world. And if something isn't overwhelmingly awesome, it's trash. Like I said it last week, I was worried that if the Bears got down by double digits, their game plan that they used against the Raiders wasn't going to work, and it didn't. The defense didn't play well, they didn't run the ball, and they were playing from behind most of the game. It was the complete opposite of what happened the week before. So this could have been a real nice opportunity to talk about Tyson Bagent being a nice find that's going to be a solid developmental quarterback in the Bears system, and he'll be a good addition to the quarterback room. And if need be, he can hold down the fort while Justin Fields is out. But because he was able to lead them against Las Vegas, we hear the broadcast team saying that Justin Fields needs to study Tyson Bagent, and it went from being a nice little story to this wild, divisive debate. But what else is new?
Don't even get me started on that broadcast. It was bad enough watching my favorite team just go out and just get smoked, and then having to listen to Chris Collinsworth and that commentary, and that Justin Fields, the Bears need to have him study Tyson Bagent, who's making his second career start. What are you kidding me? I mean, the Tyson Bagent story is amazing. I think the Bears have found a really good backup quarterback, which is important. But like, for any outsider listening to that broadcast and listening to Collinsworth, it almost sounded like he was talking as if the Bears had benched Justin Fields for Tyson Bagent, and not that he was hurt. So I don't know. It was the broadcast, but yeah, back to Bagent. When you look at like what he was able to do against the Raiders, right? That was a perfect game plan that suited him. You lean on that productive run game, those short, quick passes. You're not asked to do too much. Your defense is able to help you out. But we saw what happens when you finally play a quality opponent, when the run game stalled for the first time this season, or at least in a while. And he was asked to do a lot more. And, at times he looked good and at times he didn't look good, but he's a rookie. He's an undrafted rookie. So that's to be expected. And we're going to get to see him again for a third week because Justin Fields has already been ruled out. So we'll see if he can continue to at least stack some performances and see if he can continue to grow. But
why can't it just be a nice little story that they found this guy out of D2 and he's gonna be a real serviceable backup and he gets his for? Why does it have to be like, wow, when's the Hall of Fame ceremony? Like honest to God, like I get it. You have to have storylines to talk about during the course of the week and the course of the broadcast and all this other stuff for time filler, for content filler, clicks. I hate that term, like clickbait or whatever. But I get it. There has to be stuff put out there. But like to run with it as if, like you said, he's the anointed one. Like that's not fair to him either. That's not fair to the kid to put all that pressure on him either. So let him keep developing, and you see what you got. But yeah, when has patience ever been? We're Bears fans. We don't have patience for anything.
Yeah. Plus, I'm gonna say we're the Bears, so like they know the quarterback controversy, and that's a big thing. And they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, hey, let's run with this," because it's always a thing in Chicago. So let's just go ahead and run with that. We'll get lots of clicks and lots of attention, but
why not?
Yeah, it's just brutal.
Yeah.
Okay, John. So we're gonna pivot to a topic that's been dominating news recently. So big news that came out on Tuesday was the Bears' action and inaction at the trade deadline. So once again, the Bears shipped off a second-round pick before the deadline. This year, they acquired defensive end Montez Sweat from the Commanders. Also of note, the Bears did not end up trading away cornerback Jaylen Johnson after giving him permission to seek a trade. So, John, what are your thoughts on the Bears trading for Sweat and not trading Johnson? Somehow, you're going to manage to get this 5 seconds and go.
Yeah, okay, there's a lot to unpack here. As for the Sweat deal, of course you have a little heartburn over what happened last year with the Chase Claypool trade. As of right now, I think the Bears traded away the 35th overall pick for Montez Sweat. Now, this was a big area of need, and I'm not sure how deep the pass rushing crop is in this year's draft. We'll have to talk to Danny Shimon about that. But for me, this move will have some real implications for Ryan Poles. I think Montez Sweat, on the surface, this is a good move, but depending on the money that will eventually be wrapped up in him. But if Poles screws up 2 big trades 2 years in a row, I don't know how the higher ups look at that and think everything's going in the right direction. In 2 years, he will have traded the 32nd overall pick and potentially the 35th overall pick. And eventually you want to see some return on that investment. As for Jaylen Johnson, I'm not in the business of giving anyone from the Bears the benefit of the doubt, but I'm hoping this was just a move to let Johnson check his market around the league and then come back to the table like Ryan Poles basically said in his press conference, although it doesn't sound like he's too keen on talking about an extension until he might hit free agency.
Yeah, it was busy. And I mean, again, I woke up like not thinking the Bears are going to do anything, and then it just became super busy. And starting with Montez Sweat, it's a move that makes sense because the Bears had just a laughable pass rush, worst in the league by far, 10 sacks. You look at like that one stat that's been floating around. Montez Sweat has 6.5 sacks, which is the same amount as the entire Bears defensive line, which is just embarrassing. It says it all. So it's a move that, it looks to be for the future, right? Because when you trade for him, you have to go out and you have to sign him to an extension, which Ryan Poles was talking about, because that was the one thing about the trade. People were like, whoa. You're trading a 2nd round pick for someone who's not under contract next year? I mean, understandable. And with Jaylen Johnson, I mean, he's just someone who, I've talked about it here. I think the Bears need to re-sign him. He's a cornerstone piece for that defense. And I really hope that they are able to get something done. Like you said, John, this could be a negotiating tactic where you kind of let Jaylen go around the league and say, okay, well, other teams maybe aren't going to pay what you're looking for, and here's what we're paying, and we'll get back to the negotiating table, which it sounds like during the offseason. But the hope is that you can lock both of those guys down who will be pivotal parts for the defense.
Yeah, I'll give credit where credit is due. I thought Ryan Poles was very transparent in his press conference today. There's plenty that you can criticize, but whenever I see something that I appreciate, I'm going to talk about it. Like I don't know how many other GMs would be, as upfront about some of the processes that were going on there. Not saying that I love everything that he does, but I will say that I did like that press conference talking about his process and being very transparent about how they interacted with Jaylen Johnson. So I don't know. I mean, it just feels like now he probably wants to see what his market is in free agency. Then whenever people are looking for a cornerback in free agency, when they don't have to trade a draft pick for him, they can just say, okay, well, because when you trade for someone like that, it's about like same with Montez Sweat. When you're trading for them, you're basically trading for the right to then overpay them. And I don't want to use the term overpay, but pay them a lot of money. And then you're just like, okay, here's our 2nd round pick, and what we get is a good player that we now have to pay a lot of money to. Now, a lot of teams may be thinking, okay, the asking price for Jaylen Johnson is either a late 1st or an early 2nd. The Bears ain't going anywhere. Let's just wait until he hits free agency, and then we'll offer him the same contract we would have offered him after we traded for him. And maybe we pull him away from Chicago, because it's not like he's leaving a Super Bowl contender. It's not like he's not like you'd have to be ripped away from the Chicago Bears because of the great, infrastructure they have there. So, I mean, it's very possible that the other teams are just like, we'll wait until the offseason, then we'll go get him. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, for sure. And, we're going to stick with the defense now. So after shining against Las Vegas, the Bears defense crashed back down to earth violently against the Chargers, with Justin Herbert throwing for 298 yards and 3 touchdowns. So I ask you this, John, was this performance against LA more indicative of what the Bears defense actually is? You got 55 seconds.
Yeah, probably. It looked like the Chargers were covered in Crisco with the way the Bears were missing tackles. I would love to see the yak yards the Chargers racked up, and I'm sure I could have found that had I been a more responsible and professional show host, but it seemed like there were numerous times that a 2 or 3 yard pass went for 8, 9, 10 yards or more. And when your defensive-minded head coach says the team needs to do the basics better, I think that's a huge indictment on the head coach. This is supposed to be your bread and butter. Your ability to run a defense is why you got this job. How are you still concerned about the basics in week 8. I mean, it's no secret that the wins under Eberflus have been against some pretty bad quarterbacks. Trey Lance, Davis Mills, Mac Jones, Sam Howell, Brian Hoyer. So at no point in his tenure as Bears coach has he really stepped up and made life difficult for a top-level quarterback. But when they're playing against lower-level competition, yeah, sometimes they can get it done. But whenever they have to face somebody of a higher level, they seem to struggle.
When you were listing those quarterbacks off, I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize how bad that those quarterbacks are and how the Bears have yet to beat a team with a good quarterback, which under Eberflus, which is it's just embarrassing because, as a defensive minded head coach, the one thing that should be good is the defense, and it hasn't been. I mean, outside of the run defense, which is top 3, which is just incredible considering that they were like dead last or near dead last season. But yeah, it was bad because like you said, when they're playing to their level of competition, you can really see that they're doing fine. It's like JV playing JV. But then when they have to like step up to varsity, they just get absolutely crushed.
Yeah.
And it sucks because I mean, that's what he was brought in for, especially because the Bears are known for their great defenses. So to have the defense be this embarrassing, it's just like unfathomable as a Bears fan. So,
and I would listen. I'm okay with it. I've come around on this a lot where it's just like, I don't even, if they're, ranked 13th, 14th, 15th, I'm okay with that. But, something has to carry you. And it's not like, the offense isn't good enough right as it stands right now to say, we're going to put up enough points that we only need the 15th ranked defense. And so both sides of the ball are struggling. And that's why the Bears are where they're at. I don't think I'm not breaking any news here. You don't see like this incredible, thought process going on in my mind. Neither side of the ball is that great. So this is what happens.
Oh, we're just same old, right? Just stuck in an endless loop.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to finish with this. John, after this week, we will officially enter the second half of the season, praise the Lord, with hope essentially gone from the fan base. I want to take your temperature as a Bears fan right now. So this might sting, but I want you to take your time. No clock for this one.
Look, this is tough, man. The Bears have been bad for quite some time, and now it seems like fans are going in two directions. Some fans are getting apathetic, which is the worst thing in the world. They have been burned so many times, and the team is giving them nothing to look forward to. So maybe they're using their Sunday afternoon to cut the grass or rake the leaves, and they'll follow the game on their phone. Other fans are staying very engaged, but they're trying to figure out who's the most to blame, and we're seeing internet arguments all over the place about whose fault this is. As for my fan status, all I know is the team is bad and I'm ticked off, and I don't necessarily care whose fault it is. I've said it a million times. I'd rather be wrong about everything and be able to wear a Super Bowl t-shirt rather than correctly guessing who is screwing up the Chicago Bears. But I do bleed blue and orange. I live and die with this team every year, and I will love this team until they put me in the ground. But my aggravation is and always will be pointed at Hallis Hall. I'm mad at the organization as a whole. What I want is for my team to start having some real accountability with real standards being set as it pertains to winning football games. If this team is inexplicably bad, someone, whether it's Ryan Poles, Kevin Warren, or even George McCaskey, needs to come out and say, this is unacceptable. We are talking about the Chicago Bears, a team that has been around for over 100 years. We would love it if this team would operate with serious expectations almost every year, but we know that's not the case. The perception around this team locally and nationally is so bad that it's driving people to apathy. Like I said, I don't know exactly what should be done, but somebody needs to start shaking things up. No one has ever achieved greatness by making sure everyone around them is comfortable. That'll do it for B55. After this message, we'll preview the Saints game and talk with Danny Shimon, the Barroom's lead analyst.
The fall is where we rock here at the Barroom Network with over 15 shows scheduled from September to January. Make sure you subscribe to the Barroom Network's YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. The Bears are back on the road this week when they travel to the Big Easy to take on the New Orleans Saints. Aldo Gandia previews a team that finds itself at 4-4 and tied atop the NFC South.
Saints in the red zone. It's been a struggle all year. Carr, short, Kamara inside the 10, inside the 5, lunging for the touchdown.
The Saints offense is marching back to New Orleans after scoring 5 touchdowns and a field goal against the Indianapolis Colts. Prior to that win, the Saints had lost 4 of 5 games. They were piling up yards, but scoring field goals, not touchdowns.
I think just finishing the drives helped everybody feel better about it. I thought the last few weeks we've been moving the ball well, and at times early on we moved it well, and certainly in the second halves of games and things like that. But we finished our drives with touchdowns, and we connect on some big plays that helps too. But it just, when you finish in the red zone, whether you run them in, throw them in, it makes everybody feel better about, when you get a lot of yards and move the ball.
Their red zone scoring for touchdown percentage moved up after the Colts game, but is still among the league's worst at 27th. That's well behind the 4th place Bears. Quarterback Derek Carr has thrown 8 touchdown passes this season. That's 3 fewer than Justin Fields. Chris Olave is Carr's favorite wideout target, although the two have not always been on the same page.
Carr to throw.
Rashid Shaheed is proving to be an explosive threat, averaging over 25 yards per catch over the team's last 5 games. The Saints' rushing attack has been on and off, mostly off when playing at home. They've averaged 84 yards a game in their 3 home games this season. Only Taysom Hill has a run of over 20 yards. Hill is the renowned dangerous weapon who can run, pass, and catch. But make no mistake, Alvin Kamara is still this team's biggest threat.
For a Saints touchdown!
He scored multiple touchdowns Sunday for the first time this season in what was clearly his season-best performance. The Saints' tight ends offer nothing but a fair group of blockers and have totaled 2 touchdowns. Most of us remember Foster Moreau's drop pass in the end zone that would have added a victory to the Saints' win total. The team's offensive line has had more than its share of injury problems, but on Sunday they played well, allowing only 4 total pressures on 31 dropbacks. Now on defense, the Saints average 1 less touchdown per game than the Bears do. Their pass rush is led by Carl Granderson and his 5.5 sacks. But overall, the Saints' pass rush tends to disappear for long stretches. The defense overall tends to come out slow in the first half, especially lately. Sunday, they allowed 20 points to the Colts in the first half, the 3rd consecutive game of giving up at least 17 in the first half. Their run defense, usually fairly stout, gave up 7 yards a carry against the Colts. While the Saints are not as talented on defense like the Los Angeles Chargers are, they do possess players in the defensive backfield who could give the Bears wide receivers some trouble. Cornerbacks Alante Taylor.
Watch Lattimore climb the ladder and go up top and snag this one out.
Marshawn Lattimore. And Paulson Adebo. These 3 could comprise the toughest cornerback trio Chicago has faced this season. Taylor was asked about going up against undrafted free agent Tyson Bagent.
I mean, he's dishing off the ball pretty quick, faster than Fields was at the time. So, he's getting the ball out of his hands. He's making the right decisions. So, we just got to make sure we're in the right place at the right time.
You plan on bringing it now, not tomorrow.
At linebacker, veteran Demario Davis is the spiritual and tackling leader for this team.
Team down there, I don't care what they got planned to do tomorrow. Right now, they got to see us.
Kicker Blake Group has missed 4 field goal attempts, hitting 81% of his kicks. Punter Lou Headley is in his first NFL season. He's from Australia and once owned a tattoo shop in Indonesia. He's currently tied for third place in downing punts inside the 20-yard line.
At the 10. Excellent coverage down.
Both of the head coaches come from defensive backgrounds, and both have sounded defensive about their one-loss records. Dennis Allen has a winning percentage of .311. Matt Eberflus, .200. Both fan bases are offended by their head coaches. We'll see who comes out on top Sunday. For Buffone 55, I'm Aldo Gandia.
Big thanks to Aldo Gandia. As far as I'm concerned, nobody better on any level of putting together a preview video. Honest to God, it's such an asset to have with us on this show at this network, to have somebody that can put something like that together. So a big thanks to him. Let's start talking about this game and some other things going around this circus we call the Chicago Bears. But first, let's bring on the Barroom's lead analyst, Danny Shimon. We welcome you to the program. Danny, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Alyssa, John, how are you guys doing tonight?
Oh, never better. The fun never stops.
I can never get enough of Aldo breaking down special teams players.
I knew. I was waiting. I'm like, when is he going to talk about the kicker? And sure enough, boom, there he was.
That punter from New Orleans looks like he just got out of prison.
Well, it's you know.
He owned a tattoo shop.
Indonesia. Yeah, so I mean, he might have been
in Indonesia. There you go.
Takes characters of everyone to make the world go around. But let's talk about the Chicago Bears, and let's talk about some of the big news that came out of the trade deadline. Danny, Montez Sweat, he's a 28, I think 27, maybe turning just 28, 27-year-old defensive lineman who. He was the 26th pick in the 2019 draft. Never had double-digit sacks, and entering this season, he's averaged about 7.25 sacks per season. But you saw him close up at the Senior Bowl 5 years ago, and now know what he has done as a pro. What are the Bears getting in this trade? And in your eyes, is it a good trade?
Well, I got a lot of thoughts on this trade, and I tried to stay off Twitter yesterday because I didn't want to just put everything out. I want to save everything here for come down to your basement, John, and just let everything out here. So got a lot of notes here. So first of all, I'll start with the positive, right? Montez Sweat, good player, good football player, a guy that plays the run as well as he plays as a pass rusher. I've been harping on the Bears defensive ends not being sound versus the run, not setting a hard edge. Well, that's going to change with Montez Sweat. This guy is 6'6", 275 plus pounds. Chiseled frame. He plays the run. He's stout at the point of attack, and he's a guy that can get after the quarterback. Now, he gets after the quarterback differently. He doesn't have the first step quickness off the line of scrimmage. He doesn't have the quick twitch fibers like the premier pass rushers, like the Micah Parsons, the Von Millers, so on and so forth. He wins with size, speed, power, and leverage. He has strong hands, long arms, about almost 36-inch arm length. So what he does is he grabs the offensive lineman, presses them, and then he just yanks them out of the way, gets that outside leverage, and then he has pretty good closing burst to the quarterbacks. And he plays with good physicality. I think he already has 2 forced fumbles this year. He's a guy that brings the hammer when he hits the quarterback. So those are he's a good player. And for those who are worried about the second round pick from last year with the Claypool thing, this is not Claypool. This kid can play. He's a good player. Now, the negatives, he's not a premier pass rusher. He's a good pass rusher. He's not a premier one, right? So he's a guy that, like you mentioned, John, has never had double-digit sack numbers in his career. And that's playing with 3 other guys that are first-round picks. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he hasn't had double teams. He hasn't had the extra attention with chips from running backs and tight ends. So now he's the premier guy. He is the best defensive lineman on this team currently. So he's going to see extra attention now. So those pressure numbers and those snack numbers, they might come down. So just for the fans out there, I'm just letting you know, don't jump all over this guy because he's not getting the pressure and the sack numbers. Remember, he's a guy that is a good player. He's not a premier pass rusher. You still need, in my opinion, a premier pass rusher opposite of him to kind of formulate this defensive line. Now, the negative for this trade for me, guys, and I'm curious what you guys think about is the symbolism, right? George McCaskey and the Bears and Kevin Warren allowed Ryan Poles to go and trade a high asset, a second-round pick for a player. That tells me what? That symbolizes that Ryan Poles is back next year. Okay, and Ryan Poles went and got a player that fits perfectly in the Matt Eberflus system. So that tells me what? That symbolizes that Matt Eberflus has come back, and that pisses me off about this trade because I don't want either one of those guys back in their current positions. So that's what really pissed me off. It wasn't the fact that they gave a second-round pick because I think, like I said, Sweat's a good player. He's going to improve that defensive line. Not a premier, pass rusher, but a good pass rusher. But this means, at least from the way I'm reading it, I'm curious what you guys think. This means Poles and Eberflus are back next year, because I'm pissed off about that.
Well, let me ask you this, Danny, because this would make my opinion a little more clear, or at least my vision on this a little more clear. Would Sweat be able to go in multiple schemes? Because I've heard that he could play in a 3-4 and a 4-3. He could go in both schemes if necessary.
He could play a 3-4, but his best position is a hand in the ground defensive end. He's tailor-made for a 4-3 front. And I don't want them to, if they make a coaching change, to say, all right, you got to go get a defensive coach that plays a 4-3 because we made this big investment. So, sure. He can play on top, he can stand up on his legs and play an outside linebacker position, but he's best suited, I would say, as a hand in the ground defensive end.
For me, I don't know if I know that we try to dissect every little thing as is an indication. Is someone coming back? Is someone getting fired? I saw someone tweet today that the Montez Sweat deal cemented that Justin Fields would be the quarterback next year, and I was trying to figure out how that lined up there. But if you can try to peel back the layers on some of these things, and for me, it's just they needed a pass rusher. Montez Sweat, like Poles said, and I'm trying not to believe everything that I'm hearing, but because I've been burned too many times when I do that. But they didn't think Montez Sweat was going to be available. He is available. They trade the second round pick and they bring in a big upgrade to the line right now. And if you have a rookie, it would take some time to get accustomed to the system, and maybe they don't think they have a lot of time, and so they bring in this guy, they inject him into the system, and they see what they got. So we'll see. Listen, there's still 9 games left. I don't know if any decisions have been made. Honestly, I don't know if any decisions have been made right now. So I'm trying not to buy too much into this about what it means for the coach. But it's I don't know. We got to let the rest of the season play out. Alyssa, you might feel differently.
Yeah, no, I'm with you too. I think it was more about going out and getting an edge rusher, which is something they desperately needed. But I don't know. Danny has me worried now, because I thought maybe it was an indication that maybe Poles is safe. I mean, Ryan Pace got 7 years, so this is year 2, so that wouldn't surprise me. But with Matt Eberflus and everything that happened, but I saw, I think Leo mentioned in the comment there, that, listening to Poles' press conference, he did sound very attached to Eberflus, and it's worrisome. I know we still have 9 games to go. There's a lot more room for this Bears team to spiral out of control. You hope that Ryan Poles isn't afraid to fire someone or to fire a head coach, especially if his own job is on the line, maybe that would kind of spur him into action. But I don't know. It felt like they needed a pass rusher, but again, if you're entrusting Poles to go ahead and use a draft pick, a premium draft pick like that, then maybe he's back. I'm hoping that Matt Eberflus isn't there. I can't do this again. I can't do this, guys.
The way Poles talked today, Alyssa, the way he talked today, he was throwing bouquets at Matt Eberflus, talking about, of all days, he comes out and says, Matt hires the right people. I'm like, are you serious? He hires the right people? Your second coach has been fired by HR. Heck, but at this point now, HR, you guys I'm rooting for HR to eliminate the entire coaching staff right now. Just continue to go through all the files. Maybe HR will get rid of all the entire coaching staff for us. Who knows?
And hire the guy to do it.
We'll be clear that one coach did resign and one coach was fired. But of course, before we move on, just want to say hi to Heidi, who's in the chat room. I know that she's been dealing with a lot of the things that are going down in Mexico, so I'm so glad that she was able to join the chat room. Hope everything is going better than it has been, and we're all with you. Barroom loves you. We're glad to see you in the chat room. Danny, I do want to go to one of the questions that was brought up in the chat room. We'll just start with Ralph, since we were talking about Ryan Poles, and it says, Danny, what is your issue with Poles? Although I think you have made it pretty clear throughout the last 8-9 weeks. But what is your main issue, I guess, with Ryan?
Ralph, my main issue comes down, I don't trust the guy. I think he's a guy that has been hired for a position that it's over his head. I think I just saw today, whenever he's in front of the media, he's always nervous. He just talks some stuff that doesn't make sense in terms of, again, throwing bouquets at Matt Eberflus in terms of what he does and in terms of how he prepares the team. Guys, week 1, this team wasn't prepared. I think we all agree. agree. Week 3, okay, there are class of the Chiefs. I mean, against the Vikings, I don't think they're prepared to play. Last week, we sure hell know they weren't prepared to play. So, going from his coaching staff hire to some of the free agents signings that have been unimpacted, I just doesn't think he's done anything that's gone ahead and made a big impact to getting this Bears team back on top. And this is a key, huge off season. I can't stress how big of an off season this is. And to trust a guy that might be in over his head, if he falls on his head in terms of this offseason and just totally blows it, I mean, you're sending this franchise back 5-7 years, or we're starting all over again. So that terrifies me, and that's why I just don't feel like Ryan Poles is the guy that I want heading this rebuild, especially with this offseason already. He's traded away a second round pick again. Montez Sweat, good player, but that second round pick is already gone. So. Johnny mentioned earlier, some people were talking about maybe this means, Justin Fields stays. The only way that I can see that happening is if they go ahead and say they have a top 2 pick and a team wants to go up and get one of those quarterbacks. Now he can recoup that second round pick and more by trading back down. Maybe that's where the theory is, in terms of them, Justin Fields staying. But again, he had a chance today to kind of give a little bit of a nod, a little positive reinforcement to Justin Fields. And he totally bypassed that opportunity at the end. So I just don't trust Ryan Poles. I think Matt Eberflus is in over his head. I think he's a good defensive coordinator, just not a good head coach. Yeah,
and I mean, that is a good point because they're going to have 2 high draft picks. So even if they do have a top 3 pick, and let's just say they want to use it for a quarterback, and then they pick again at like 5 or 6, they could move back to 8, 9, 10, 11 and potentially get a second round pick or something more if they're depending on how far they back. So I get that, where it's like, okay, we're going to burn this second round pick because we might have the flexibility to get that second round pick back when we move back plus more. So I mean, that kind of makes sense, but I mean, once again, I'm trying to understand like what organization we're talking about here. So I do also want to go to another question because I was quite curious about this when we were talking about it in B55. It says, is Sweat better than a second round pick would be? And I also would like to know a little bit about the draft class with the edge rushers. It doesn't sound like if they had 2 top 5, top 6, top 7 picks that there would have been an edge rusher necessarily worth taking that high, but it's still early in the season.
Yeah, it's still early. It's only November 1st. I mean, a lot of things can change from now until the draft. There's obviously, the regular, the end of the season, the postseason, and there's the pre-draft process, the Senior Bowl and the combine and all the other stuff. But yeah, I mean, right now, I don't see an edge rusher in the top 10 of this draft. I mean, my top, I got 2 guys right now that I see could go in the first round. That's Jared Verse, a guy from Florida State. A guy I had last year, actually, tail end of the first round, early second round. Surprised he came back. He's a transfer from Albany. Went to Florida State last year, had a pretty good year, came back. He's a guy that's big, strong at the point of attack, has some of that bend ability you like to see off the edge. Only has 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks so far through 8 games. So he hasn't had a great season so far at Florida State. And the other guy that's really taken off for me is Latu from UCLA. This is a guy at 6'4", 265. But the thing about him, the scouts are not sure about is he a hand in the ground defensive end? Is he a stand up, off the 2-point stance, outside linebacker? He's got that tweener ability, or in terms of his size. Another guy transferred from Washington, went to UCLA, had a great year last year, 12.5 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. This year already has 13 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles through 8 games. And this guy is a physical presence. He's got a high impact motor. A guy that'll be another physical edge rusher off the edge. So those are my 2 guys that I can see. Again, his thing with Latu from UCLA is his size. Some teams are questioning whether he's standing on the leg outside linebacker or is he hand in the ground defensive end. And the arm length, there's questions about, is he sub 33-inch arm length? All that stuff. All that gets answered, during the post or pre-draft process, I should say. So those are my 2 guys right now in terms of impact guys, edge rushers, possibly going in the first one, but not top 5, not top 10 guys. So and then you have a bunch of guys, sprinkled around. You have Dallas Turner from Alabama. Another guy is athletic guy, productive. I think he's got 7 sacks already. But again, 240, 245. You got a bunch of these tweeners now. These guys are in a sub 250 range in terms of weight. And now you just got to kind of project them in terms of, all right, how do we use them in this system? Is he a hand in the ground? Is he a multifaceted edge rusher? Is he a guy we can kind of run around all over the place? So there's a bunch of those guys out there, but nothing that cements says, hey, this guy is a stud, a dude right now, other than again, Jared Verse for me and Latu from UCLA early on.
Now, if you ask Danny Shimon a draft question, you're going to get a complete breakdown with stats and what their projection is and what they are. Like that. Like, don't ask that question unless you want the full answer, because you're going to get. And I love it, because I just learned more in 30 seconds than I knew all about half these college football players beforehand. One more question for you, Danny, before we move on, and we're going to stick with the Ryan Poles theme from PZ. Could Poles do anything to change your mind at this point, Danny?
Could he do anything to change my mind at this point? I mean, okay, so I think I was talking to Aldo, or I might have been talking to you, John, at the function we had a couple of weeks ago, and I said of the two, Poles or Eberflus, you said pick one, it's got to go. It's Eberflus. You could talk me into keeping Ryan Poles, right? Because Alyssa, you mentioned it's only been 2 seasons so far. He's going to go into the third off season. So to answer your question, PZ, if he goes and he fires Eberflus, hires a good coaching staff, right, does right about in terms of what I want to do, in terms of provide Justin Fields with a coach that builds the team around him, doesn't give up on Justin Fields. Now, he can bring competition. You can go and get another quarterback and have him compete with Justin Fields. I'm not opposed to that, right? But just kind of bring in a coaching staff that takes the talent you have right now and just builds the system or schemes around those players, offensively and defensively, right? And then just and now continue to add talent and be smart with those picks. Don't make dumb trades, or don't just give away players or picks or something like that. For example, Jaylen Johnson, I think we're going to talk about him later on, but for me, I have a bad feeling about Jaylen Johnson. And I think you're going to be giving away a player there.
Well, let's talk about the player that they just acquired, and that's Montez Sweat, who currently does not have a contract, but Ryan Poles assures us in his press conference that they are working on a contract for Montez Sweat. Alyssa, do you have any information or a lowdown on what a player like Sweat would demand as a contract extension and how it might play into the Bears' 2024 cap situation?
Yeah, like you said, John, the good news is that the Bears are working on an extension for Sweat, which that was the big concern with this trade. When you go and you look at various grades around different media outlets, it was like at one, it was like A to Z, depending on what happens, right? If you can sign him to a long-term deal, then that grade's obviously going to be higher. And Chicago's also in a great position with the salary cap looking ahead to 2024, where they're projected to have $110 million per over the cap, and that's the most in the NFL. So lots of money for Poles or whoever the GM is going to be to work with. As far as what Sweat might demand, looking at Spotrac, they projected him to have a 4-year deal worth $110 million, which would equate to $25.5 million per year. I think the Bears are definitely looking probably at north of $20 million at this point, and considering that they shelled out a premium draft pick for Sweat, I mean, him and his agent hold all of the leverage in negotiations right now. So that, coupled with, the projected salary cap, I think the team is definitely sitting comfortably with this move and ultimately locking him down to an extension, which hopefully happens sooner than later.
Oh, so now that we know that, I didn't really ask you straight up, Alyssa, do you like the trade? Do you think it's a good trade for the Bears?
I think so. I mean, obviously it's a big move giving away premium draft capital, right? For when you're a 2-6 team that's not going anywhere. There has been a lot of disagreement, but I do look at it as being a good move, because you look at it like this, Chicago improved their league worst pass rush with a proven player in Sweat. And like Danny said before, I mean, he's immediately your best defensive lineman at this point. So, I mean, when Poles was talking about like the move and why he made it, he was talking about getting ahead of the offseason, which is something that he did last year when he went out and got Claypool. Obviously, it didn't work out that well, but that was the kind of move that he was making to get ahead of free agency and the NFL draft, where, it's not, at least in free agency, looking at that class, it's not really going to be a premium guy there. So, I mean, seeing that he made that kind of move, looking to the future, it makes me think that he's going to be here next year. But yeah, and again, you have those exclusive rights, right, to Sweat and not having to battle other teams, or, because it's probably going to be a little bit difficult unless you pay a lot of money to convince some free agents to come to Chicago, especially if Matt Eberflus is still here, which let's hope that is not the case. And I mean, I know like the concern when you look at it, this is the second year in a row that Poles has used a second-round pick on a player. And I mean, of course, we're worried about the whole Chase Claypool thing, but I definitely think that just because it didn't work out with Claypool doesn't mean it's not going to work out with Sweat. So, I mean, ultimately, I think I'm a fan of the move, because they needed a pass rusher desperately.
Yeah, and just real quick, if I can stress, this is not similar to the Claypool thing. Claypool was benched in Pittsburgh. Claypool was third receiver, sometimes even fourth receiver. He was going to get traded. It was just the fact that the league was astonished that Ryan Poles gave up a second round pick for Claypool. That's what happened, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so scared of Ryan Poles. With Sweat was a guy that Washington wanted to keep. Chase Young was a guy they wanted to trade, but from my understanding is they both are represented by the same agency, and the agency said, we're not going to sign one guy and not sign the other guy. So either you sign both or we're both going to free agency. And I think that's when then Washington said, you know what, we might just, bite the bullet and get our draft capital here. And I think Atlanta was also a team rumored to be in on Sweat. He's from Georgia. He mentioned that today in his press conference. So, there are teams that are interested. So this is a totally different conversation here. I'm not worried about the player. I was freaking out about that second round pick for Claypool. I think, at least with the worst case scenario, you got yourself a solid defensive lineman here with this trade.
We briefly discussed Jaylen Johnson, but I want to go back to you, Alyssa. I mean, we heard from Ryan Poles today about the process and why they couldn't maybe get something done and the communication and the disappointment of it. And then that leads everyone to prognosticate he was asking for this much, or no, because he doesn't want to play here, or the Bears were lowballing him. And I mean, I don't know for certain. I'm not sure anyone does other than the two parties who were negotiating and emailing back and forth. But what do you think? I mean, is this going to come down to a compensation thing? Is he going to price himself over to a different team? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting situation. I'm really hoping that Danny is wrong, by the way. But listening to Johnson when he met with the media today, and I mean, first off, I just want to say that I'm impressed by how he's handling this whole thing, because as we saw last year with the Roquan Smith situation and how it just spiraled and bridges were burned, and it was just he had to go. It just unfortunately, but listening to Johnson up there, he was backing up some of the previous reports that were out there, including that he's halting contract talks at least until the end of the season now. But the important thing is he did reiterate he wants to stay in Chicago, which I think is important, right? Because no bridges have been burned. He was talking about how he understands that it's a business and what Ryan Poles has to do. But he did say they could revisit things in the offseason. And right now he just wants to focus on his individual accomplishments and all that stuff. But it was interesting. There was this report that came out from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler where it was talking about the Bears offer being, quote, pretty low, which I'm assuming that's part of the reason why Johnson wanted to explore other options. And I think that we can agree that if he does hit free agency, that he's going to be a top cornerback on the market, and in recent history, we've seen that garner about 15 million per season. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Bears offered versus what Johnson wanted, as he essentially said he wasn't looking to set the market for cornerbacks. He just wants to be paid for what he's worth. So I don't know. Poles, listening to him, he said that he wants Johnson back in Chicago, and it's a matter of getting it done. And there was one thing that was very interesting kind of about the two sides kind of finding common ground was, when Johnson and his agent were looking elsewhere, that there was this wide gap between what the Bears were offering and what other teams were offering. So, and Poles kind of denied that and saying, they're still in the early, terms of negotiations and that can always change and stuff. But I found it interesting. But I mean, that's definitely going to be, I think, a major storyline to follow. It's also interesting too, if they don't sign Montez Sweat to a long-term extension anytime soon, you have to use the franchise tag on him, right? So if you were able to get him signed to that extension, you can perhaps, if you're still negotiating with Johnson, use that franchise tag to buy yourself a little bit more time. But I'm hoping that, unlike what Danny said, that they can find a way to get this done, because I think that Jaylen Johnson is an important part of this defense. And at some point, Ryan Poles has to keep the guys, the young promising players on the roster. We saw him do that with Cole Kmet. Now let's look to the defensive side of the ball too.
Yeah, and the professionalism from Jaylen Johnson has not gone unnoticed. I wish I would have brought that up sooner, because that's a real thing that I think a lot of people respect. I think maybe I'm not saying that's intentional, but I mean, a lot of other teams are going to see that too. They're like, hey, this guy's handling this situation very well. That's a guy that we would like to have on our team, a consummate professional. Go ahead,
one key thing I want to add to that, if I may, John and Alyssa, is reading that room with Jaylen Johnson. He said that was a question posed to him. I forgot how it was worded. Basically, if Montez Sweat gets his contract before Johnson gets his contract, seeing he just got to the team, how would he feel? And he said he wouldn't like that. And reading Ryan Poles, he said that that they're close on Montez Sweat. So basically, he wouldn't have done this trade if they didn't have the parameters kind of set. They just kind of waited for everything, the physicals, all that thing to be done. So I would expect within a week we'd hear Montez Sweat sign this contract. That's why I think that cements Jaylen Johnson's, anger, and I think that's what's going to happen is they're going to franchise him and not let him go for free, and then they're going to try and negotiate a trade from there because I don't think Jaylen Johnson's coming back next year.
Well, Danny, let me ask you about Jaylen Johnson, because there's a lot of people that aren't just, they're not just debating on whose side they're on, the Bears or Jaylen Johnson. They're also debating on what he's worth as far as his production and his play. So I'll ask you, because you're way better at evaluating talent than I am. So what have we seen the best of Jaylen Johnson, or can he actually keep ascending and become a guy that actually would be worth more than what he would potentially sign for?
No, I think he can get better, John. I think he can get better. I mean, we haven't seen a full season yet of a healthy Jaylen Johnson yet, right? And he hasn't had a pass rush in front of him to really get in, provide pressure on the quarterbacks to get him the opportunities to make those plays. We saw the game against Raiders. The big knock on him was his hand suck. Well, his hand looks pretty good when he was inside of 2 passes versus the Raiders. So it was Brian Hoyer, so we should kind of look that in there as well. So, anyway, moment of silence for Josh McDaniel, by the way, guys.
Oh yeah, he's the first coach to get fired is from
midnight
because
it was on midnight. It was like
well, because
how did he get fired before Eberflus? My goodness,
because he lost to the Bears.
That's right.
That's
rock bottom.
I think if he stays healthy, and I think if he continues to make plays on the football and get those interceptions, I think he's going to get better and better. And I think with him, again, he even said, he goes, I'm not expecting to get a Trayvon Diggs type of contract. I think I just want to be, paid fairly. And the way Ryan Poles kind of talked about it today, it sounded like he was going and negotiating for a used car. I'll give you an offer. You give me an offer. You give me an offer. There's no final offer. I'll just give you back an offer. And then they just said, you know what? Because they know what they're coming. Everyone knows agent wise, they know where their player ranks, right? Mm-hmm. If he's not Trayvon Diggs, he's right in that top 5, top 6 area. So there's a number there. You don't come in way below the number and try and work your way up. These are human beings. These are not used cars here that you're trying to purchase here. So I think that's what affected Jaylen Johnson and his camp. And I think that's where the trade demand came in there.
Yeah. So it's going to be, as Bears fans, I think we're probably programmed to think the worst is going to happen. Like they're going to lose Jaylen Johnson and they're not going to get anything back for him. But we'll see. Go ahead.
And if you think about it, he's already Poles is already set up, to move on from Jaylen Johnson. He's got Tyreek Stevenson, he's got Terrell Smith, he's got Kyler Gordon. Jalen Jones is a young corner that when he's played, he's done pretty well. There's a whole off season left. You can go get another sign on one if you want, a veteran. You can go draft another one if you want, if you lose Jaylen Johnson. So I think that's he's already set himself up to, if he loses Jaylen Johnson, he feels confident enough. And again, if you increase that pass rush up front, you'll need premier cornerback talent back there. You can get guys that can cover for a little bit lesser than Jaylen Johnson and just still be effective. So I think Poles has set the ground up where they're going to sign Sweat, they're going to tag Johnson, and eventually they're going to come to agreement, and then they're going to trade Jaylen Johnson off the franchise tag.
All right, let's pivot to the offensive side of the ball. Let's talk about your boy, Tyson Bagent. Danny, he had 2 deep throws that should have gone for touchdowns. The first, I think we actually we might have a video of this. It was the one that was completed to Darnell Mooney, but the officials, they wrongly ruled him down. And as you hear, if you're watching the podcast, you see that right there where he catches the ball and no one touches him and he keeps running and the one referee's not sure. He's still running along with the play, and then the whistle blows and they call it dead. And if you're listening to the podcast version of this, you're probably wondering, wow, this is great radio. But anyway, you're watching this. If you're watching the YouTube version, yeah, you can see that. And then we go to the Velus Jones non-catch where the turf monster comes up and gets him. He falls down into the end zone. Ball then kind of hits him in the chest there. And Alyssa can't believe she's
I'm covering my eyes. I don't want to watch it again.
And that was a nationally televised audience.
I know. Trust me. The amount of texts that I got about that were like incredible. I'm like, oh, come on, guys.
Third round pick, guys. Third round pick, Bill.
Getting back to your last comment about
Ryan Danny Poles. Just has plenty of receipts for the anti Ryan Poles trade. Yeah. I'm just saying.
Danny, do these 2 throws at least tell you anything about let's go with Bagent's arm strength? And shouldn't the Bears maybe try, or should they have tried to get a little more vertical against the Chargers, because they were ranked pretty bad against passing yards allowed?
Yeah, no, I don't think it tells you much about Bagent's arm strength. I mean, that first one to Mooney looked like it was a good throw. The one to Bayless, it looked like a little wobbler. It didn't come out clean out of his hand. So, but I did want him to see just kind of stretch the defense and challenge the defense vertically more. Let's see what the kid can do. Let it rip. And what do you got to lose, right? So that's the thing I think the ball was underthrown a little bit to Bayless, but still, Bayless hit him in his numbers. He should have still caught that ball. But yeah, so like I want to see more. But the biggest indicator, or the negative thought that put in my head was why did you pull him for the halftime throw against Minnesota where he put in Nate Peterman? Why would you do that?
That was against the Raiders.
I'm sorry, against the Raiders. You're right. So why would you do that? That tells me that they don't think he's got the arm strength, right? And I love Bagent's comeback in the post game. So I got a cannon. All right. So I want to see it. I want to see him go ahead and let him rip. Let him throw the ball down the football field. Let's see what he can do. Let's see Tyler Scott's speed. Let's see more shots down the field to Mooney. That's what I want to see. So I don't know in terms of Tyson. I don't think he's got the biggest. I don't think he's got a cannon like he proclaims. But I think he's got an average to above average arm strength. And he made some nice throws in that game against the Chargers, especially that first half. There was one that he kind of like threw right over the second level linebacker into DJ Moore. That was a nice throw. The one where he's rolling to his right. I'm sorry, to his left. It was a nice laser throw to the sideline to I believe it was Komet or Tunyon, 2 yards short of the first down. But I mean, those are hard throws. So the guy can make throws. And there was one. He was on the boundary side hash mark, threw it to the opposite end sideline, to the field sideline on a rope to I believe it was DJ Moore there as well. So he's made some NFL type throws. I want to see him air it out. Let's see what he can do. Again, you have 2 wins. You're not going anywhere. Let's see what the kid can do, right? So that's what things that I don't know if it's a confidence thing, and I don't think this kid lacks any confidence. I think this kid can go out there and throw 3 interceptions and still come back and still air it out the next series. So I want to see them allow him to go and just air the ball out and see what he can do.
Well, the coaches have something to lose, Danny. Their jobs, and they're in CYA mode, where it's just like if this guy throws 5 interceptions, I could be out of here.
And I know this is your show, John, and this is your basement, but I just want to comment real quick on that 55 topic you had with what the broadcast said.
Yeah,
that to me, I said a couple weeks ago, it's CYA time up at Hallis Hall. Mm-hmm. That is all stuff that comes up from this coaching staff. Collinsworth doesn't come up with that stuff out of his rear end. That's all stuff that's planted in his head by the coaching staff. They're all trying to cover. So if Bagent goes out there and has success, hey guys, it wasn't us. It wasn't our system. It wasn't our offense. It was the guy pulling the trigger, and they're setting up the scapegoat for Justin Fields. That's my opinion on what happened there with that commentary.
Burn it to the ground.
It's like a spy movie, Danny. The Chicago Bears. Are they?
I've been living for these people, this organization for 40-some years, John. I know these people already.
Yeah, there's so much conniving backroom things going on with this here. But let's finish on something that. Well, I almost said fun, but it's not. The Bears have not won 2 straight games since weeks 16 and 17 of the 2021 season. Let's look at the schedule. And Alyssa, I'm going to start with you. Let's get the schedule up here. But
where's that schedule? Lovely schedule graphic.
I love the graphics, so that's why I'm going to be patiently waiting for it. But as we wait, as I'm just vamping here, there we go. Do you see the possibility of Chicago winning 2 straight with the rest of these? If they beat the Saints, maybe. Then I think they could beat the Panthers and win two straight.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the first one that just kind of popped out was Cardinals and Falcons.
Yeah.
Or maybe Falcons and Packers, because my God, the Packers are bad.
Well, I looked at the next one they play. They're on the road Monday night against the Vikings, but the Vikings, we don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be like. But
if they beat the Vikings, and then can they win the bye week? And then there we go.
Do they win the bye week? And they wouldn't technically lose.
Not this team.
So,
they would find a way to lose it.
Yeah.
I think my best guess would be the Cardinals and the Falcons. Those are the 2 that stand out. But then again, Kyler Murray might be back.
He will be back. Yeah, he got activated off the top list.
Yeah, he's going to be back. So maybe Falcons Packers. Maybe. I'm not feeling confident, John. Not at all.
I don't know why. I'm just drawn to I think maybe Saints Panthers would be the only one, but because I think that they can and will beat the Panthers. I mean, they're I'm not saying this is a slam dunk, Danny. I'm just
Are you
saying.
going to New Orleans? Are you going to New Orleans?
I will not be in New Orleans.
Okay,
no.
then they're not being the Saints. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, like, if they could pull this out somehow. I mean, they're on the road, which is New Orleans is a very difficult place to play, and they're vying for the top spot in that division. I just don't know. I guess, yeah, maybe Alyssa, maybe it is Falcons Packers at the end, because maybe the Packers were trading players off. They've kind of called it quits on this season as well. Which any other season, if the Bears were even remotely good, would be awesome. That the Packers are kind of waving the white flag halfway through the season, but the Bears are in the same freaking ship as they are. So, Danny, do you see 2 wins in a row here?
No, I won't. I'm questioning whether they can even beat Carolina on Thursday.
They need to.
That's
They need that
true.
pick to be better. They need to beat Carolina. Keep that pick nice and low.
I don't. I mean, the Arizona game and Atlanta. I mean, yeah, because that could be a end of the year kind of thing. But Kyler Murray's due to come back, and Arizona plays hard for their coaching staff. So that's one thing. Now it is Christmas Eve, so that plays in their favor, and obviously the Atlanta game is also New Year's Eve, so
2 home games.
Maybe some partying going on here in Chicago.
John's going to be there at both of them.
Yeah.
The thing is, my next question was, John, which of these 2 games are you going to go back to back, and that's what I'm going to pick.
I mean, if Ryan Poles is going to keep talking about his his negotiations with his players, he needs to be calling me for negotiations to get me tickets to all these games, because it gets a little pricey after a while. So I mean, I know that I would love to know. There's probably no way of doing this. How many Bears fans are actually 2-0 when attending games this year, because they haven't won many games, and I don't know how many games the Bears fans actually went to the Washington game and went to the Raiders game. So
I think that's you. I think you're the last of the Mohicans, man.
I feel like I'm in very rarefied air that I went to 2 games this year, and both games they won. So I feel very lucky in a way, but also it's very sad that that the only those 2 games were pretty rare on the schedule. But there is something to say about weeks 16 and 17 both being they're obviously Christmas Eve and then New Year's Eve, both of those in Chicago. Both of those warm weathered teams are coming into Chicago in cold weather. So Alyssa, you've changed my mind. I'm going week 16 and 17. Cardinals and Falcons are their best bet to win 2 in a row. And I hate that we even have to have this segment, because we're trying to look through a schedule and say, where could they possibly win 2 games in a row? Because it just has not happened. So
it's something about the schedule, the colors and the lights that make us get all positive, right? I mean,
yeah, especially at the beginning of the year, huh?
It's like just looks. Yeah, we can beat that team. Oh yeah,
we need the spaceships back.
You know what?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The indicated like primetime games. We thought they were spaceships and they were spotlights. Yeah, that was.
There will only be like 2 or 3 of those next year.
Guys, remember, I'm the fool that picked them to beat the Chargers last week.
That is
Danny. We were all fools. Luckily the tape got burned on the week before the season started. But I'm pretty sure I look like an idiot because of everything that I was saying. I think I had them going 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I had them 5-1 at one point.
Oh my god!
And then I
missed that time.
I had them hitting the skids late in the season, but like I had them off to a hot start, and boy, just like everything else that I've ever done on this show, I was 100% wrong. But that's part of my charm. I'm literally wrong about everything. So I mean, yeah, week 16 and 17. Danny, is that your best? Is that your best guess?
Mean, those are the 2. And all the Packers though. I mean, you hear the latest that Jordan Love is now put on notice. He might not be the future of that franchise. So who knows how they're going to look week 18. So maybe
you're saying 3 in a row then, huh?
No, maybe you lose to Cardinals. You beat
Danny,
and you beat
playoffs. Wow. Bold statement.
So we got to get John.
I made a mistake once. I'm not making it again.
Wow, there you have it. Danny Shimon. They're ending on a 3-0. They're winning 3 straight, and they're getting the 7th wild card. Super Bowl, Danny. Wow, that's
they're going to lose to
Aldo. No, take that down.
They're going to beat Atlanta and Green Bay.
All right, that's fair. I can handle that.
So John, get prepared to spend the new year in Chicago and Green Bay.
Chicago sounds great, but I don't know if I want to
go to take one for the team, John. Look,
I don't want to go to Green Bay in January.
I heard the women are hot up there, John.
The weather is cold, and I don't like that. Although I'm in Pennsylvania, it's not like it's much better over here. But
weather's cold, but the women are hot. That's all I heard.
Good. Did you see that on my T-shirt, Danny? All right, we're off the rails, much like we always are. But before we wrap this up,
Alyssa, off the rails already.
The Bear season's been off the rails.
Hey.
But Alyssa, tell us what's going on over at Bears Wire and what you're working on. The 15,000 stuff, articles that'll be out this week.
Yeah, but lots of trade deadline stuff today. For the last 2 days, I forgot that there was football. I felt like we were like full in free agency NFL draft mode. It was just so busy. So we got plenty of trade coverage with Montez Sweat and the Jaylen Johnson news pregame, getting you ready there is a football game on Sunday, folks, against the Saints. So we have plenty of pregame coverage. We have our game picks out there. This segment has inspired me to do a post projecting the rest of the Bears schedule, which I think you can probably guess how that's going to go. Woof. That should be fun. Then we're going to have you covered during the game and after. So make sure you check out bearswire.com.
Danny, the mock draft
article, Alyssa.
Yeah,
I know. I didn't do my hot seat yet. I have to, because again, I thought Tuesday was going to be safe. I don't know why. I let my guard down.
Never assume that.
I got to catch up on that.
There's more stuff to talk about with the Bears Monday through Saturday than there is on Sunday. Like that's just how this team operates.
Absolutely.
Danny, the mock drafts are getting geared up. We are ready to talk mock drafts. We are in November now. And as the weeks go by, more and more Bears fans are wondering, they're taking shape of what pick they could potentially have. Some of these websites are already putting out mock drafts. What do you got going on? What are we looking over right now?
Yeah, just doing the preliminary work like we talked about today with edge rushers. Going to start posting some of these things on our YouTube channel here. Some little brief mini scouting reports of some of these guys like Jared Verse and Latu from UCLA. Going to get those out hopefully here real soon, and you guys can see some of these players that I'm talking about. Keeping my eye on in terms of edge rushers, and also we'll attack the offensive line. Obviously, receivers. The guy I've been really high on is Keon Coleman. And if anybody watched last week's game with Florida State, that guy is a beast. So obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the top of the pecking order at receiver, but Keon Coleman from Florida State is right behind him, guys.
And don't forget, the Bears do play a football game on Sunday. They play the New Orleans Saints. And make sure you join Danny, myself, and Coach T on Bear Football for our post-game show. The three of us will share immediate reactions, carry Coach Eberflus and other press conferences, break down key plays of the game, and just give you all of that just raw emotion. After the clock hits 000, we go live as soon as the game is over. Make sure you hit that subscribe buttons and get your alerts, because, like I said, when the clock hits 000, we go live for Bear Football. But that will do it for us tonight. Thank you so much for tuning into Buffone 55, whether it's your first time, your 55th time, the video version, the podcast version, the audio version, whatever version. We appreciate each and every one of you. For Alyssa Barbieri and Danny Shimon, I'm John Buffone. We'll see you next time right here on Buffone 55.